Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to the Fantasy Maverick podcast, and it is finally draft weekend. Yes. So I want to help you win your draft. So here are my top 10 tips to help you win your fantasy draft in 2020. Here we go.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast coming at you from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And today we are going to talk about my top 10 draft tips for 2020. And we are at draft weekend, man. It's finally here. So I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that are getting ready, trying to figure out what you're going to do, what players you're going to take. And I just wanted to remind you all to please go to my website, fantasyfootballmaverick.com, and get my app. My Perfect Fantasy Draft is going to absolutely help you dominate the draft this year. You utilize that along with my top 50 dominator strategy. Believe me, you are going to have a monster season this year. So without further ado, I'm going to get to my top 10 draft tips right now. And I really want to help you this draft day. So my first tip is go in with a plan. You've got to have an overall strategy that you're going to take. For me, my key strategy is I'm going to take running backs in the first 3 rounds. I'm going to load up on 3 elite running backs before I go for any of my other positions. And it's just because after round 3, the pool of running backs thins out considerably. Their value plunges. The only way you're going to get good value running backs is if you do it in the first 3 rounds. But also you need to have contingency plans in place. You got to say like, okay, I want to take a running back here. But if the running back I want is not available, I can shift and I can take this wide receiver instead. That's a good way to help you out. I also say utilize your queue in your draft board because that's going to help you know that a player is still on the board that you are interested in. I queue up every player that I'm interested in, so I have a nice list of players that once it comes to my pick, I'm not going to get flustered if my favorite pick gets taken. If he gets taken, look, I've got a big long list of players on my queue that I can choose from as an alternative. It really helps lower the stress level. Now, the second point I want you to know is that you need to know your league point schedule and you need to draft to maximize the benefits of your point schedule. Okay? If you are in a standard points league, that means that wide receivers are devalued relative to running backs. Running backs are much more valuable. So you want to load up on running backs. And when you look at your roster, I would want my roster every week to have my flex slot utilizing a running back in a standard points league. Likewise, in a PPR league, running backs are discounted, especially the running backs that don't catch any balls. We're talking players like Nick Chubb or Jordan Howard. Derrick Henry to a lesser extent. Derrick Henry gets the volume, and he's still good in a PPR league. But Marlon Mack, those kind of players, they are terrible in a PPR league. You don't even want to bother with them. Instead, go with wide receivers. Again, like I said, in a standard league, in a PPR league, I would like to start 3 wide receivers every week in my flex spot. But any running back that I get is going to take advantage of the PPR because they're all going to be prolific pass catchers. I'm going to pick up players like Kenyon Drake or Austin Eckler. Guys like that, guys that are going to have 50, 60, 70 targets during the course of the season. Those are the kind of running backs you want in a PPR league. So make sure you know and understand that. My third tip is don't chase last season's stats, okay? I just want to remind everybody that back in 2018, Patrick Mahomes was the best quarterback in football. Saquon Barkley was the best running back. And the Bears defense was the best defense in the league. And what happened in 2019? Well, Patrick Mahomes was the first quarterback selected. Saquon Barkley was the first running back selected. And the Bears were the first defense that were selected. And in the end, Patrick Mahomes ended up as the QB8. Barkley was the RB10. And the Chicago defense was the 17th best defense. So this year, you've got players, Christian McCaffrey, Michael Thomas, Dak Prescott, these are all guys that I have tagged in my app as being regression players. Stay away from regression players and don't chase last season's stats. Look for the guys that are in great situations to do well, to do even better this year than they did last year. Someone that's had an NFL record-setting season, there are most definitely going to regress back to some average that they've had before, and you are going to be very disappointed if you take them in this year's draft. So my fourth tip is value, value, value. When it comes to my analysis of players, value is usually the most important thing that I look at before I start considering the other aspects. Taking a player too early, leaves money on the table when it comes to your team, and you don't want to do that. If you can't get a player at good value, then you should pass on him to get a player that does have good value. My app basically has, what it does is it creates a value rank for all the players. And you can compare that value rank against their draft position and very easily see if that player is overvalued, undervalued, or fair valued. Stay away from the overvalued players. Now, my fifth tip, this is for season-long fantasy. Season-long fantasy requires you to draft consistent and reliable players. You want players that can stay on the field and, when they're on the field, get a consistent level of usage on a week-to-week basis, even when the game is heading south. And that's the most important thing. The worst thing to have is that, like a running back, and this is very true of those running backs that don't catch a lot of passes. If that team falls behind, that running back is not going to be on the field anymore because they're going to be passing that ball to try to catch up with the other team. You don't want that kind of a player. So in my app, we're going back to my app now, these are two of my other key stats that I look at. You want to avoid players that have a low reliability, and you want to avoid players that have a consistency rating of less than 5. Those are the players you should stay away from. And if you draft yourself a team full of high reliability, high consistency players, you are going to be a much more confident team, and you're going to do much better than your opponents that have inconsistent and unreliable options. So my next tip is to take a chance this season on one rookie running back. I got to say, this year for rookies, this is a tough year for rookies, probably the toughest that I've ever encountered because of the fact of, because of the COVID restrictions and then no preseason. Okay, these guys are already drinking from a fire hose. And what I am anticipating is that most of these players are going to be around 4 weeks behind where we would expect them to be at the start of the season. So expect a slow start, but they should ramp up. But when it comes to running backs, there's three rookie running backs that I very much like, okay? I like Jonathan Taylor, I like Cam Akers, and I like DeAndre Swift. What I say is I will draft one of them, and I will draft one of them as my third running back, or fourth. But as my third running back, they're a flex play. And that means that I can manage the risk a little bit better on my team. And while someone like Jonathan Taylor is ramping up his usage in production during the course of the season, I could start other players in the flex position ahead of him if I feel it's necessary. A player like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who I very much like. I mean, I think he's going to be very good. But again, to have to take him as either my first or my second running back, I just don't like where I have to take him. So I might take a shot with him in the second round if I can get him in the second round. But for the most part, he's going like top 8. So I'm going to stay away from him, instead take an established player for my team. And that is my next tip, which is continuity is your friend this season. I've already talked about rookies, but also we talk about players that switch teams in the offseason. We talk about teams that changed coaches or changed offensive coordinators. Any changes to the system or the players with these key players is going to have an adverse impact on the team itself, at least for the start of the season. And so I want to find players that have played with the same coach, the same offensive coordinator, and the same key players that they were playing with last season. Those guys are in the best position to succeed because there's been the least amount of adjustments to what's going on that team. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to take a guy that switched teams, or I'm not going to take a team that has a new offensive coordinator or a new coach. No, But if I have a choice and I'm trying to decide between two players and one is established and one is new, I'm going to go with the established player this year. And I think that it's going to be better for you overall. So definitely consider that when you're making your draft picks. My 8th tip is to use optimal allocation on your team. Now, the typical draft is 15 rounds. And the typical setup is 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex, a kicker, a defense, and 6 bench slots. What I say is if your setup is like that, here's what you do. You take 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, 1 defense, and 1 kicker. For wide receivers, I would take 4 wide receivers because what I do is I count the number of wide receiver slots, the number of flex slots, and I add 1. So that'd be 4 wide receivers. The remaining 7 slots, I am going to take running backs. I'm going to load up on as many running backs as I can because the running back position is the hardest position to replace during the course of the season. All these other positions are very deep. Quarterback, super deep. Wide receivers, unbelievably deep. And the other thing, going back to the rookies, most rookie wide receivers don't really start making noise till the second half of the season. But if we're saying it's going to be probably another 4 weeks for them to start to emerge like we normally see them, that means we're not going to start seeing rookies really do something until week 11, 12, right in that time frame. That's right at the end of the fantasy season, but you got to realize there's going to be a ton of these rookies on the waiver wire because none of them are going to be startable assets until late in the season. So people are going to drop them in favor of other players. Take advantage of that. This is the deepest wide receiver class that's ever entered the NFL. They're going to be slow to develop, but there's a ton. There's so many. And don't worry about trying to get yourself more wide receivers. Running backs, again, after the first 3 rounds, you don't have any top 50 value running backs. There just aren't any left. And so, like I said, load up on running backs. 7 out of 15 in a 15-round draft. That's what you should be targeting. Okay, so tip number 9. Okay, use my top 50 dominator strategy for your 12-team draft. Now, if you haven't seen the details of this, go and watch my other videos. I'm going to put a link at the bottom so you can find them easy. But basically, here's what it comes down to. You are going to try to get yourself 6 top 50 value players in your first 6 picks. If you do that, that is going to give you a massive advantage over your opponents because most teams are only going to have 4 top 50 players. And it starts out basically you're going to go 3 running backs and then you're going to go 3 wide receivers in rounds 4, 5, 6. And like I said, receivers are deep as the ocean. There are fantastic receivers available round 4 through round 6. And the key is round 6, take Jarvis Landry. Rock solid RB2 in the 6th round is an unbelievable deal. It's going to help you win your league. And no one else is going to be able to compete with the value you're bringing to the table. I did a draft yesterday, and I used this strategy, and I actually had 6 players. The lowest value player was 43rd overall. So I had 6 of the top 43 players on my team. It's going to be very hard for your opponents to compete against that, so take advantage of it. Do it this year. And so my final tip is, and we're going to circle right around back to where we started, my app, My Perfect Fantasy Draft, available through my website, fantasyfootballmaverick.com, is going to give you the edge. It's going to help you find those top 50 value players. It's going to help you find those consistent and reliable players. It's going to show you who the breakouts are. It's going to show you who the regression players are. It's going to show you who the contract year players are. It's going to give you all the information you need to make good decisions on draft day. So I encourage you to go check it out. And the subscription is only $19.95, but this weekend I've got a coupon. The coupon code is FFC20. That's Fantasy Football Crazy, FFC20. If you use that coupon code, you'll save $5 off the cost of the app. The subscription is 1 year. It would only be $14.95. You can use it on as many drafts as you have, and it will absolutely help you conquer your leagues this draft season. So Thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And please, if you haven't done so, subscribe to my channel because we're going to be doing stuff all fantasy season, helping you with your starts and sits, also pickups during the course of the year. And I've got my good friend, Swami Rob of the 94 Rock Morning Show, who's going to be doing the start and sits program with me again this year. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. Have yourself a great day. Have yourself a great draft. If you want me to analyze your draft as well, please send me your lineup, and I'd be happy to let you know what I think. So thank you very much for watching. Have yourself a great fantasy season, and we will talk soon.